Welcome. I'm Kim Teha, Director of the Pennington Public Library. Thank you again for joining us for our ongoing art series with Janet Mandel. Tonight's talk is titled Raphael, Artist and Visionary. Today's program is proudly brought to you by the Friends of the Pennington Public Library and the Hopewell Valley Arts Council. Before we begin, here are a few quick updates from the Arts Council. For the 19th annual Hopewell Tours of the Arts, mark your calendars for Saturday and Sunday, September 26th and 27th. This self-guided weekend celebration showcases our thriving local art scene. You start at the Hopewell Valley stage, pick up your map, and view the, quote, one-piece show, end quote, which features a single work from every participating artist. The tour is free, though donations are warmly appreciated. Also, if you guys haven't heard, Hopewell Valley Stage is reopening. Yes, the stage is back from summer recess with a fantastic lineup. This Saturday, August 22nd, there will be line dancing with live music from Jet Weston and his Cocktail Cowboy Combo. And dance instruction is included, which is wonderful. And also for the weekend of August 28th, there will be performances by Jack Furlong Orchestra's 10-piece Little Big Band and two-time Grammy-nominated indie singer-songwriter Becca Stevens. So to plan a fun night out, view the full lineup, or purchase tickets, head over to hvstage.org. Now for some brief housekeeping. If you have any questions during this presentation, please type them into the Q&A section, and I'll share them with Janet at the end. You can also use the chat window, as many of you guys have discovered, for general comments. Now, a little bit about our speaker. Janet Mandel taught in New Jersey's public schools for 32 years, specializing in English, art history, and world languages and cultures. She now presents on a wide variety of art history topics at museums, libraries, and community centers across the region. Please join me in welcoming Janet Mandel. Janet, thank you so much for joining us again.
Let me thank everybody for coming. And the reason why I picked this topic, because those of you who come to my talks probably know I don't do a lot of art from the Renaissance. I don't do a lot of art from before the 19th century, although I do some. But the Met had a fabulous exhibition of Raphael. As you can see here, this is from their webpage. It opened in March and it ran through June, and it was really phenomenal. So I decided I needed to do a talk, and that's why I put this together. So what do you think, Kim? Should I continue, even though I don't see myself? I don't think it's a problem. I don't need to see myself as long as people can see the video.
Yes, Janet, I will continue working on this. Zoom always changes their settings, so I'm
Right.
constantly being challenged with new things. So
Right. So I'm just going to continue, and it's fine. I hope everyone else can see, and I hope that all the little boxes have disappeared, so they're not obscuring the screen. You can go to, if you have the ability to go to view, and you go to speaker view, I guess that's the best way to see it. If you can do that, I can't do that on my computer for some reason, but hopefully you guys can do it. So I'm just going to continue. So this was this exhibition at the Met was the inspiration for this talk, and this was the first comprehensive exhibition on Raphael in the United States in a very long time, and it brought together more than 170 of Raphael's greatest masterpieces, and there were drawings and paintings and tapestries. Some were from public collections, libraries and museums, etc. Many were from private collections, which was really a wonderful thing, and they came from across Europe and the United States. And so I hope many of you got to see it. Those of you who didn't, this talk will not really suffice, but but you'll know a little bit about what you missed. And those of you who did see it, I think you'll maybe get a deeper understanding, since the show was so monumental. You couldn't possibly have, read everything. So anyway, so let's begin. This is his self-portrait from 1506, and it's at the Uffizi in Florence now. He was one of the defining artists of the Italian High Renaissance, and he was had quite a brief life. And in that brief life, he produced some of the most enduring images of Western art. And he lived from 1483 to 1520. That's only 37 years. But in that brief span of time, he really transformed religious painting, portraiture, and monumental decoration. And he's often remembered right alongside with of Leonardo and Michelangelo as part of kind of this triumvirate of Renaissance masters. So I thought it might be interesting to begin with kind of a quick comparison of these three artists. Now, Leonardo, and this is by Leonardo, the Virgin and Child with St. Anne, he is known for offering psychological depth and experimentation in his works. This Madonna scene shows quite layered, really, and complex relationships among the figures here. You see those gentle turning of the heads, the soft, smoky sfumato, those are the shadowy transitions, and then all of the interlocking gazes between Mary, the Christ child, and St. Anne, that's Mary's mother. And these suggest a really profound inner life, almost rendering these figures as human. And they seem to think and feel in real time, and their expressions seem to be shifting as if caught in mid-breath. And that's what Leonardo really excelled at, conveying this mood through atmospheres, shadows as half smiles, all of those fluid bodily interactions. It just created such psychological realism rather than any kind of overt drama. And speaking of overt drama, that's what Michelangelo's works were all about. His works displayed an emotional intensity and monumental power. And here is his version of, or one of his versions, of course, of the Holy Family, the same subject really as Raphael's. And this one is also at the Uffizi. But look at his Holy Family. They are muscular. Those figures are twisting and tightly wound. They occupy this circular format, the tondo, but they press forward with so much force, it's almost as if they're going to jump out of the frame there. Mary is sitting there in a very powerful contrapposto, and Joseph leaning in there protectively. And even the Christ child is very robust and energetic. And it's almost as if these bodies are carved in paint, which is, of course, not surprising since, we think of Michelangelo primarily as a sculptor, although, of course, he was a wonderful painter too. But his figures here are solid and they're tense and they're very expressive. He creates this very high emotional temperature, and he reveals that through the gesture of the figures, the physical engagement, rather than any kind of subtle expression, which is, of course, what Leonardo did. Raphael now, he synthesized these elements from Leonardo and Michelangelo into something uniquely his own. And so he gives us now clarity and grace and harmony and a kind of idealized beauty that feels almost effortless. Now, this is his Sistine Madonna, which is in a museum in Dresden in Germany. And she is serene. Look at her face, and she's poised and she's balanced, and her movement is just flowing effortlessly. The composition has tremendous symmetry. There's the vertical drapery there gives it a very dramatic look, but yet the triangular grouping of the figures is very calming. You have Mary and the child, you have Saint Sixtus on the left and Saint Barbara on the right, and this creates this harmonious whole. And all of their faces are open and readable, their gestures are flowing. Every part of the painting contributes to kind of a sense of celestial order. You look at the clouds there on the bottom, you get this idea of a celestial order. And then down at the bottom there, the famous cherubs, those Raphael cherubs that you see reproduced on mugs and posters and note cards and all of that, they're just reinforcing this gentle, contemplative mood of the painting. So here are all three of them, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael. Leonardo giving us psychological depth, subtle emotional interplay, all of this shadowy ambiguity. Michelangelo's work offering us intensity and physical power and emotional charge. He uses all of this muscular tension in his work. And then Raphael offering us grace and balance and clarity and harmonic design, all of this idealized beauty and perfect visual clarity. So that kind of sets the scene. And now let's do a little bit of biography. So Raphael, who's Raffaello Sanzio, was born in Urbino, a small but very culturally sophisticated city. It was a court city. Now, remember, at this time, Italy was not a country; it was just a compilation of city-states. So Urbino was its own state. Now, Raphael's father, Giovanni Santi, was a court painter and he was a poet. And he introduced his son very early on to humanist ideas and artistic techniques. And when Raphael was still a child, his mother died. And shortly afterwards, just a couple of years later, his father also died. So this left him orphaned at about the age of 11. Now, but Giovanni had already begun training him, and Raphael was steeped in the basics of painting technique. And then he also had the benefit of local guardians who continued to support his talent. And by the year 1500, so he's still a teenager, he enters the workshop of Pietro Perugino in Perugia. So you see there on the right, there's Urbino, and then down, if you look south, you see where Perugia is. So he's sent to Perugia. He goes into Perugino's workshop, and he gets an amazing education there. And the exhibition at the Met in the very beginning of it had paintings by Perugino and members of his workshop, and that was really informative. And I didn't add them to this because it would have been a 2 hour lecture if I had done everything. So but it was really interesting. Now, Perugino's influence on the early works is unmistakable in Raphael's work. Very calm, symmetrical compositions, very clear outlines, and a very gentle sweetness of the figures. Here is one of them. This is the Mond Crucifixion. He makes this in 1502. He's barely out of teenagerhood. This is in the National Gallery in London today. And this was actually an altarpiece, part of an altarpiece, and it was commissioned by a wool merchant and banker named Domenico Gavari. And he wanted this altarpiece for a chapel, a burial chapel, which was dedicated to Saint Jerome. And this is in Umbria today. So you see, there is Christ's body, and it's hanging from the cross. And there are two angels who are balanced on either side of him. And if you look at what they're standing on these very delicate slivers of clouds on either side. And they have these little casks in their hand. They're catching blood that is flowing from Christ's wounds. And look at the very top. You see the sun and the moon. They're both visible in the sky. And that is supposedly because Christ's crucifixion and death happened at the time of an eclipse, supposedly. And that's why he's got the sun and the moon up there. Now, at the foot of the cross, kneeling there, you see St. Jerome and Mary Magdalene, and they're gazing up at Christ's body, and their tremendous reverence and pity there. And then, of course, to St. Jerome's right, our left, you see the Virgin, his mother, and she's dressed in purplish black to denote mourning. And she is wringing her hands, and look at the expression on her face. And then on the other side is St. John the Evangelist. And both the Virgin and St. John are looking toward us, really, I think, as they're wringing their hands in grief. Now, here's another work that he did when he was in Perugino's workshop. It's called The Three Graces, and this is now in a museum in France, in Chantilly. Now, this may represent the first time that Raphael depicted the nude female form in both front and back views. And it could be, I mean, I'm just guessing here, but you know, when you take and I've never done this because I'm not an artist, but when you take an art class, when you want to become an artist, the very first thing you do is drawing from life, is drawing from the nude. So this could have been something that Raphael was doing as an exercise or as a practice, but it depicts the three graces of classical mythology. And by the way, that's why they can be nude, because they're not real women. They're muses, they're the graces, they're figures from mythology. Now, supposedly Raphael was inspired by a ruined Roman marble statue that had been displayed in the library of the cathedral in Siena in order to create this. but it's a early masterpiece. It's a very small scale, by the way. We're looking at it on our computer screen, so it kind of looks big, but it's less than 7 inches on each side. It's a square, but it really exemplifies, I think, the ideals of beauty and harmony that were central to the High Renaissance. Now, here's one of his early Madonnas, Madonna and Child. And this is Madonna and Child with book. And it's here in the United States. It's at the Norton Simon Museum in Pasadena. Now, again, an early work from Perugino's workshop. Very balanced, serene figures. They're described very simply and naturalistically. And there's a lot of simplified geometry here. You got that pyramidal grouping of the figures. And her look at her cloak. It's like this deep blue arch that kind of surrounds her and then encloses the Christ child as well, and also frames the book that she holds, which is important. And the inscription in the book tells us that this is the ninth hour, which is a prayer that was recited daily by all monastic communities to commemorate Christ's crucifixion and death. So the Christ child's eyes are turned toward heaven as he's contemplating his own sacrifice as the Redeemer of mankind. And Raphael here, he's really depicted more than just a beautiful image of the Madonna and Child. He's created almost a meditation piece. And it's got a profoundly spiritual quality. And Raphael, his Madonnas were, even when he was a teenager, were in very, very high demand, and you can really see why. So Raphael made a lot of rapid progress in Perugino's workshop, and he gained recognition really as a master by the age of 18. And so then, of course, he has to leave Perugia, and he travels to Florence. So they're circled in red as Perugia, and to the northwest we see Florence. So he goes to Florence in 1504, and he is finally exposed to Leonardo and Michelangelo when he's there in Florence, and this dramatically expands his artistic personality, his artistic possibilities, really seeing these two artists. Leonardo's use of sfumato, all of that soft atmospheric transition, this encouraged Raphael to move away from Perugino's crisp outlines. And then Michelangelo's sculptural forms pushed him toward more dynamic compositions. So here is one from an early period, early time in Florence, but it lives in Rome at the Galleria Borghese. It's called Young Woman with a Unicorn. Now, Raphael, although he's expanding his horizons, he's very eager to gain status. And that means he had to secure commissions. He had to get people to pay him to make art. So we wonder as we look at this then, who is this sitter and why is she holding a unicorn? Well, the answer is we don't really know for sure. But art historians, of course, are always thinking about what these things could mean. So it's generally accepted that because the unicorn was an emblem of the Farnese family, this is one of Italy's grandest dynasties, along with the Medici, etc., it's thought that perhaps this woman here, who's clearly very wealthy, that she was a member of the Farnese family and she was on the marriage market. There were no dating apps or no internet, etc. So if you wanted to marry off your daughter, you had to have a portrait of her made, and then you would, have copies of it made, etchings, etc. And you would get these out and try to find a husband for her. So perhaps they think Raphael was commissioned to paint this portrait, which would then be shown to potential suitors. Now, legend had it that only a virgin could tame the unicorn. Unicorns are dangerous. And so this depiction, since if you look at that unicorn, she's obviously been tamed there, if you see it there, that since she has tamed it, clearly she is a virgin and she is chaste and she is worthy of being married. So if you see how her fingers kind of intimately wrap around the unicorn's front legs, it really does suggest that she has trapped this mysterious beast. So Raphael is idealizing portraying her. She's this blushing bride to be. He's giving her virtue and wealth. Look at that necklace, and purity and fecundity and charm. And these are feminine virtues really only present in utopia. And so, he's portraying her as perfect as the unicorn, and therefore not really real. She's about as real as the unicorn is too. Now we also I found out after I first put this together, actually maybe from the exhibition, I don't know, but we found out that the painting was altered twice. So the first time was by Raphael himself. It didn't originally have a unicorn on it. There was a dog on the woman's lap. And dogs were very common symbols of fidelity at that time, and would often be shown, with young women to show that they were chaste. And even though we don't know for sure who the sitter is or why Raphael swapped out the dog for a unicorn, that kind of exchange kind of fuels this theory that he got this commission from the Farnese family, and so that's why he decided to put a unicorn in there. Then, so if you remember, this is what the painting originally looked like. So it was changed once, and then it was changed again in the 17th century. Not He was long dead by then, 100 years later, and the sitter's bare shoulders were covered. By that time, by the 17th century, I guess it wasn't accepted that a young unmarried woman would have bare shoulders. So her shoulders were covered, and the unicorn was replaced by, do you see this? Now look carefully. It's a wheel with spikes on it. And also, this is some kind of a frond, and these are the accoutrement of Saint Catherine, because Saint Catherine was martyred. She was she was proselytizing for Christianity. She was trying to convert people, Saint Catherine, to Christianity. And so the ruler at the time, and I'm sorry that I don't know who that was exactly, but he decided that she had to be killed, and she was going to be killed by putting her on this wheel with the spikes, and that would kill her. But the miracle was when they tried to put her on the wheel broke. Right. So there's the wheel there. So what the whoever changed this painting, and we don't know who it was, but they transformed this oil portrait into this kind of religious icon, with a much more demure a woman with her shoulders covered. But it was only in the 20th century, with X-rays, et cetera, that all those other layers of change were revealed. Now, during these years in Florence, Raphael also painted a series of Madonnas that reveal increasing sophistication in composition, in emotional warmth, and in spatial depth. And he became known for, he was the guy, if you wanted a painting of a Madonna and child, Raphael was the guy you were going to go to. And the exhibition kind of posited, and I thought it was very interesting, that this connection that he had with motherhood, with a mother and the child, might have been the result of the fact that his mother had died when he was so young. And maybe he was, thinking about, what he had missed out on. But I thought that was kind of interesting. So let's see now some of the Madonnas now from this period in Florence. So this is Madonna of the Goldfinch at the Uffizi today. Again, you have that triangular composition, which echoes Leonardo, but it yet retains Raphael's gentleness and sweetness. And you see the Madonna here. She's young and she's beautiful, and she is clothed in red, luscious red and blue. And red and blue are often the colors that Madonnas are painted with, because red signifies the Passion of Christ, and blue was used to signify the church. Now, Mary has a book in her hand, and this one too. This one is the Throne of Wisdom. And this term, the Throne of Wisdom, is usually applied to images in which Mary is seated upon a throne. But look at what Raphael is doing here. In this case, she's not on a throne. She's sitting on a rock. And it looks so natural for Mary to be sitting on this natural kind of throne. So he's really humanizing her. He's universalizing her. So anyone could look at this and see Mary. Well, she's the mother of God, obviously, but she also can look very, very, very human. And the background is quite beautiful, varied and calmly frames the central subjects. Now, in addition to the Madonna and Child, John the Baptist is in this painting. And a young John the Baptist, who, by the way, was Jesus's cousin, he is holding a goldfinch, and the Christ child is reaching out to touch it. Now, the goldfinch represents Christ's crucifixion. The metaphor comes from the legend that the bird's red spot, you see the red spot on the bird's head? That was born at the time of the crucifixion because a goldfinch flew down over the head of Christ and was taking a thorn out of his crown when it was splashed with a drop of his blood, and that's how goldfinch got that red spot there. That's the story. Here's another beautiful Madonna and Child. This is La Belle Jardinière. And this, of course, is got a French title because it's at the Louvre today. Raphael began to paint this one right after finishing the Madonna of the Goldfinch. And the subjects, again, are Mary, the Christ child, John the Baptist. And you see Mary's face is situated at the apex of that pyramid, and her body is filling the rest of the painting. And she's holding on to the Christ child who's standing at her foot to her right. And John the Baptist is on the ground, kneeling there to the left of Mary, and he's holding his reed cross with his right hand. Now, Mary's got a book in this one too, and this book foretells of Christ's death, and it's resting on her lap. And if you notice, there is a very faint halo over Jesus's head. They're also, you can't really see them in this reproduction, but there are faint halos over the other figures as well. And this is a feature that kind of disappears in the High Renaissance, but it's here in this painting. The landscape in the background is, again, a beautiful countryside garden. Now, Raphael used this unified naturalistic composition with this rich and luminous colors here and blended light and shadows to help create this very realistic atmosphere, again, humanizing the figures. And he diverged from the previous practice but that other artist did, of placing many religious symbols in the piece. So instead, he combines religious iconography. He's got the book there and the halos, but he combines that with these beautiful landscapes to show, once again, both humanism and the teaching of the Catholic Church. So here are these four fairly early Madonnas by Raphael. Now, this is an altarpiece, and I knew about this work because from another talk that I had researched, and I knew it was at the Met. And so when I found out that there was going to be this exhibition at the Met, I was hoping that this altarpiece was going to be in it, because you notice down here at the bottom of the altarpiece, there's nothing here. Well, originally there were paintings there. This is what's owned by the Met today, the central part of the altarpiece, and this is called the lunette and painting here. But all of these paintings this is called the predella, by the way, of the altarpiece, the bottom part. And they had been broken up and sold off a long time ago. Here's like a schematic so you can see that. So I was so hoping that this was going to be in the exhibition, because I knew the Met would try to get all the other paintings back and reproduce it. And that is exactly what they did. And it was just absolutely phenomenal to see it. First of all, it's like 10 feet tall. The entire altarpiece is about 10 feet tall. So it's quite remarkable. Even these smaller paintings in the predella are actually fairly large. So the central painting from the predella is now at the National Gallery in London, and this is the procession to Calvary. This one here in the bottom right, that is now at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, and that's Lamentation over the Dead Christ. And then this one here, this is also owned by the Met, but they never put it in the predella. They just have it exhibited somewhere else, but now it was returned to the predella. And then on either side here of the predella are these two figures, which are now at the Dulwich Picture Gallery in London. And on the left, you have St. Francis, and on the right, you have St. Anthony of Padua. So it was really such an amazingly glorious thing to see it. Now this is also this was also in the exhibition, I believe. It's an important painting. It's called Entombment, and it's at the Borghese Gallery in Rome today. Now this was also the central panel of an altarpiece, but this altarpiece was commissioned actually by a woman. Her name was Atalanta Baglioni of Perugia, and she commissioned this in honor of her slain son, Grifonetto Baglioni, and he was murdered, and so she commissioned this from Raphael to have as an altarpiece, as an homage to her son. And this young man here, who's carrying Christ's body, is supposedly that is the visage of the slain Grifonetto Baglioni. So you have him and one other person carrying the body, and then you have two other figures up here, and you see the halo over them, and that's because they are Saint John and Nicodemus. And then to the left here, with a halo too, this is Mary Magdalene looking over at Christ's body. She's holding his hand. And in this painting, oh my goodness, Raphael really reveals himself as a master colorist. I mean, this is only a reproduction, but even in this reproduction, I think you can see how glorious the colors are. Also here, by the way, here is the Virgin Mary. She's swooning here at the site of her dead son. So so he's showing us these gorgeous reds and blues and yellows and greens, and they have this wonderful subtle contrast in the flesh tones of all of the characters. It's really such a beautiful painting. So once in Florence, this is when Raphael really synthesizes the influences from Leonardo and Michelangelo, but yet he's creating a very distinct, harmonious style of his own. And also in the exhibition, it was such a treat. There were many drawings, preparatory drawings that he did, and this is one of them. Now, he made many preparatory drawings for each painting. This is just one of them. You can see it's very different, but it was a preparatory drawing for the Entombment, the painting that I just showed you. So Raphael's career then changes because Pope Julius II summons him to Rome. So he's in Florence, and there he goes now down to Rome. And while he's working on the commissions for Pope Julius, he's also painting Pope Julius, and he creates this amazing portrait of him, again, showing his mastery of color. And this portrait is now at the National Gallery in London. So he's barely 25 years old. It's very hard to even imagine that. And he was assigned by Pope Julius to fresco several rooms in the papal palace, now known as the Stanze of Raphael. And this would become the defining project of his career. Now, unfortunately, Pope Julius dies in 1513, just a few years after Raphael arrives in Rome. But luckily, Pope Leo X, who takes over, he continues the commission of the work. And then Raphael, of course, also paints Pope Julius. And this is, again, another amazing portrait showing his mastery of color. So there are four rooms in the Stanze della Signatura, the room of the signature. I'm sorry, there were four rooms that he was commissioned to paint. But the Stanze della Signatura, the room of the signature, was Raphael's direct work. He did all of the painting in this one room. The other three rooms he designed, etc., but people from his workshop and others helped him do it. But so it is the room of the signature that I'm going to really focus on, and actually only one wall of that room again. So this is the room that Raphael did everything in this room, the paintings on all four walls and the decoration of the ceiling. So in this room, he illustrated the four different themes, and the themes were philosophy, poetry, theology, and law. And these themes were not arbitrary, but together they represent really four major domains of human knowledge as it was understood during the Renaissance, which, remember, was revolutionary. It was rebirth. It was rebirth of the ideals of antiquity. And it was also coming out of the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages. So this was really, really important. So these are the four rooms. This one, and this is the one that I'm going to focus on the most. This is philosophy, so called the School of Athens. And this embodies the truth that's discovered through reason. And it celebrates the Renaissance and the humanism of the Renaissance by depicting great philosophers, mathematicians, and scientific thinkers of antiquity in this grand architectural setting. Um, but the other three rooms, the other three walls of this one room, I just wanted to briefly show you. This is theology called the Disputa, and this represents divine truth revealed through faith. And then, of course, you have poetry, and this one is called Parnassus, and this reflects imaginative and artistic truth. And you have in here Apollo and the Muses and poets, ancient and modern. And then the last wall was the theme was law, and so this is the cardinal and theological virtues. And this one expresses justice and moral and civic order. But as I said, I'm going to only focus on this one because I just don't have enough time to go through all of them in this one. I could do a whole talk for an hour just on this, but I will try to speed it up. Anyway, in the center, you have Plato and Aristotle, because this is a philosophy, the School of Athens, all about philosophy. And when they talk about philosophy in the Renaissance, they're also talking about science too. Science and philosophy really are really the same thing. So Plato and Aristotle at the center, and they represent different philosophical approaches. Plato, idealism; Aristotle, empiricism. Plato is pointing upward. You see here on the right, you see his vision of Plato in the painting, and he's pointing upward. But also look at his face, because doesn't it resemble the figure that I have here on the left? And the figure that I have here on the left is a self-portrait by Leonardo. So he gives Plato Leonardo's face because he's saying he's elevating Leonardo to the status really of Plato, and that his importance in terms of philosophy. Now, Aristotle on the other side, he is pointing downward toward the earth, and this reflects the Aristotelian focus on empirical observation and physical reality, where Plato is pointing upward, indicating that what we see in this world may not necessarily be the final truth. There may be something else there that we can't actually see, that there's a realm that's more true than what we see at any given time. Right. And then Aristotle, of course, he was Plato's pupil. He focuses his attention on the observable, the actual, the physical, and that's why his palm is pointing down. He's pointing attention to what you can see and what you can observe in the world. Now, Plato also is wearing red and purple. Purple is the color of the ether, and red is the color of fire. Ether and fire, neither one of them has weight, right? Looking up, something that you may not be able to see. Aristotle wears blue and brown, the colors of earth and water. Earth and water have gravity and have weight. You can measure them, you can see them, you can touch them, you can feel them. It's empirical. Now, also, the entire scene here is divided exactly in half, and the philosophers on each side are aligned with the ideas either of Plato on that left side or Aristotle on the right. So on Plato's side, we see those who are concerned with issues of the ideal. So you see here Pythagoras, who discovered the laws of harmony in music and mathematics. This is the idea that there is a reality that transcends what we can see before us. You can't see music. You can't see a mathematical theorem. It exists in a different kind of realm. Now, on the lower right, you see Euclid. I've circled him there in yellow. And we associate Euclid with geometry. So Raphael gives Euclid, he puts Euclid on the Aristotelian side, and he also He gives him the features of Donato Bramante. Now, Bramante was an architect and a painter, and he was kind of a mentor to Raphael. And we're going to learn a little bit more about him, later. But Euclid here, if you can see in that circle, he's got a bunch of students around him and he's teaching them. And he's teaching them, he's bending down here. Here's his head, which has got the features of Bramante. And he's pointing to this diagram here, right? Because it's a geometrical diagram. Euclid is interested in what's measurable, what's practical, and he's showing the basics of geometry to his students. So he's on the Aristotelian side. Now, if we go back to the main room there, you see there are two large statues. This one on the left there is a statue on the Platonic side. That's a statue of Apollo. Well, who was Apollo? The god of music and light. Now, on the other side, there, I'm circling that in purple, that's Athena. She's on the Aristotelian side. She's the goddess of war and wisdom. These are earthly preoccupations as opposed to music and light, right? And that complements the intellectual themes on the Aristotelian side. Now, the ancient philosopher Heraclitus is right here, circled him in blue. And look at him. He seems to be writing and thinking very quietly. He's not really engaging with anyone. He's sitting by himself. Now, Raphael paints his features as that of Michelangelo, who at the very same time that Raphael was making this work, Michelangelo was quite nearby in the Sistine Chapel painting the ceiling. And here's a schematic of that. So here's the room that Raphael is working on. Here's the School of Athens. And here on this side, you see B, that's the room that Raphael is working on. Here is the Sistine Chapel, just a few steps away. And Raphael was known to sneak in there to check out what Michelangelo was doing. And of course, he was totally blown away what was going on, with what was going on there. So, so he makes Heraclitus's features be Michelangelo's. Now, this is one of the preparatory drawings that Raphael did. And if you notice here, here's Plato and Aristotle. Here's all the Platonic guys. Here's all the Aristotelian guys. There's no Heraclitus here. So it looks like initially Raphael was just wanted you to think that these two men were going to walk down the steps and they would join both sides together to show that there was harmony between these different ways of looking at the world, which I think is really kind of interesting. But so there he just walking down through this empty space. But then we see he eventually decides to add the figure of Michelangelo. Now, there are other contemporaries here. Socrates is in here, and Diogenes, and Ptolemy, and Zoroaster. And if you look all the way in the right margin here, see where I have it circled in blue? You see these figures here, and I'm going to get closer to them. So this is what we're seeing on the very right margin of the painting. And this is Raphael's self-portrait. So it looks very much as though he has put himself in this painting too. And then I had another version of it too, because you see many, many, many different images of the same thing on the internet. And, I didn't know what was, this one or what really is closest to it. But clearly that is a self-portrait. So art historians, have now said that there's a reason why Raphael includes himself in this painting. And it's not just to say I'm as great as all of these other guys, although that is part of it. But he's not just talking about himself, because he puts other artists in there too, including Bramante, who I already told you about. And that's because back then, painters and sculptors and printmakers, etchers, there was no such thing as fine art. You see, I didn't talk about art at all, right? Because there was no category of art. These folks were who did paintings and sculptures, etc., they were considered craftsmen, like silversmiths or weavers, etc. And Raphael is kind of saying, no, we're just as important. Artists, what we do to reveal our truth is just as important as these philosophers and scientists, etc. And that's why it's thought that he puts himself in the painting, that he's positioning artists among these great thinkers and scientists. And so he's elevating the status of artists to that of these intellectuals and visionaries. Now, Raphael also decorated the ceiling of this room. It is just phenomenal. And I have to tell you, I've been there. I've been in this room. But when I was there, I didn't know anything about art or art history or anything. But I know, even though I didn't know anything about what I'm telling you today, I still was absolutely blown away by this art. So anyway, here is the ceiling. And what he has done, remember I told you there were four themes: philosophy, poetry, law, and theology. So on the ceiling, which is adorned by all kinds of things, but he has these four medallions that correspond to those things. So this first one is a figure holding a book called Knowledge of Causes, and that represents philosophy. And then this beautiful and graceful figure is holding a lyre, so that links her to Apollo. So she is representing the theme of poetry in the room. And then this woman is holding scales and a sword, so she, of course, represents, she's justice and she represents the law. And then this woman is holding a book inscribed Knowledge of Divine Things, and so she represents theology. Now, the School of Athens, the one painting on this one wall of the four is considered the embodiment of the High Renaissance. And Raphael is showing us the intellectual and spiritual confidence of the thinkers of that time in rejecting medieval ideals. And he's showing us that opposites, even though the Aristotelian worldview and the Platonic worldview can be seen as opposites, they're part of a unified whole. And in the School of Athens, we don't just have this celebration of knowledge, but Raphael is kind of inviting us to live with and enjoy this idea of complexity and nuance, that two things that seem to be different might actually exist together. It doesn't necessarily mean discord and division, that difference can actually mean a fight, a battle to find the truth, actually. And that faith and reason, which we think of as opposites, scripture and science, revelation and inquiry, that maybe they're not enemies, but partners in the search for truth. And that's really what the School of Athens is all about. Now, while he is there painting this, he gets a visit from his old friend, Baldassare Castiglione, who met Raphael in 1504 when Raphael was still in Urbino, and Castiglione visited Urbino. And Raphael was just gaining recognition as an artist, and they became close friends. Now, in 1514, Castiglione wrote the Book of the Courtier, which, if you study ancient history at all, you know that it's becomes it's a very, very important work, because this book established standards for the behavior of the modern man, modern person. Of course, women weren't considered part of any of this, but and so this, of course, included being brave and being fearless and being being pious and all of that. But Castiglione says that the modern man also has to be a generous patron and promoter of the arts. So he was in Rome during the winter of 1515, and he and Raphael spent a lot of time together, and that's when Raphael painted his portrait. And this portrait, of course, radiates a sense of dignity and reserve and elegance, and therefore it appropriately represents the ideals that are expressed in the Book of the Courtier that he wrote. And in the School of Athens, the figure traditionally identified as Zoroaster or Zarathustra, who I've circled in red here, and I'll get a little bit closer to it. Now, he, of course, was an influential religious reformer from Persia. He's included in the School of Athens. He's that bearded man who's holding a celestial sphere. He is sometimes thought to be Baldassare Castiglione with that beard. Now, Raphael, very likely when he was in Florence earlier, saw the Mona Lisa. And art historians feel very much that his portrait of Baldassare Castiglione was influenced by Leonardo's Mona Lisa. Now, I want to move on to another portrait that he makes, and this is La Fornarina, and this is in the Galleria Nazionale d'Arte Antica, and art from antiquities in Rome. Now, art history tradition identifies this woman as the Fornarina, which means the baker's daughter. And you can see that she is partially nude here, which really is not supposed to be a normal woman here, showing nudity. You had to show a goddess or someone from Greek and Roman mythology. But if you look at her, she is, kind of in the posture of many, many statues of Venus and others. So he kind of got away with it. He kind of got away with that. And but we know who she is. She is Margherita Luti. And she is wearing an armband. If you look at her armband with Raphael's signature, that's how he signed this painting. And she is raising a kind of a veil, a very sheer veil to her still uncovered breasts. And we do know that Margherita was one of Raphael's models and also his mistress. And if you look at her hand, her left hand there is a ring. You see that ring on her left hand there? So this suggests, or art historians have said, that perhaps Margherita and Raphael were engaged or maybe even married, because we know that they were lovers, and we know that, I guess, from certain letters or what have you. But he does paint her in this really beautiful, wonderful portrait there, La Fornarina, the baker's daughter. Now, after the death of Donato Bramante in 1514, Raphael became the chief architect of St. Peter's Basilica. And he shifted the design, one of the things that he did, from a Greek cross to a Latin cross, a plan with a very long nave. And his contributions also included designing the choir with 3 ambulatories. He added several side chapels, and he incorporated towers at the facade corners. But unfortunately, like Bramante, Raphael died before he saw his designs come to fruition. Michelangelo took over. St. Peter's, though, wasn't even completed until after Michelangelo died either. But Raphael was the chief architect of Rome. He was appointed after Bramante's death. But unfortunately, most of his works do not exist anymore. But he did design several buildings for private patrons, and those are more likely to have survived. And his architectural work always included classical elements with very unexpected contrasting aspects. Now, this is an engraving of the design for the Chigi Chapel. And this is a chapel in the nave, off of the nave in the Basilica of Santa Maria del Popolo in Rome. And it's the only religious building of Raphael's which has been preserved in its near original form. Now, Agostino Chigi commissioned Raphael. He was a wealthy Sienese banker to make this chapel. And Raphael used Italian and African marble, Oriental granite, bronze, and glass. And in one of the books that I read to research this talk, it said about this chapel, it said, The result is opulent, but not garish or imposing. And I was like, what are you talking about? Not imposing, not garish. It is absolutely unbelievable with all of that African marble and Oriental granite, and bronze and glass. He also designed the dome of the chapel with all of the mosaics, which is really beautiful. And there, get a little bit closer to you see God the Father in the center there. And here is a study, a drawing that he did for that for the top. Now, Raphael was also appointed superintendent of Roman antiquities, inspector and surveyor of ancient ruins. And if you've ever been to Rome, you know there are ancient ruins all over. Now, Raphael took a very archaeological approach to these ancient treasures, and he supervised and documented all of them, all of these ruins. Now, actually, the Pope's main objective of having this was to source these materials, to destroy these buildings and take the materials to use to build the new St. Peter's. But we know from letters that Raphael interceded and said, no, you cannot do that. We have to preserve these antiquities. And so really we can say without exaggeration, I think that Raphael was the first guardian of cultural heritage in history, which is now, of course, being done more and more across the globe. Now, the last section I'm going to talk about, let me just check the time because I don't want to go too much over. Okay, I'm going to speed up here, but if you can stay for the next 10 minutes, I'll be finished in 10 minutes. I hope you will, because the next section talks about Raphael's tapestries, and this is another thing that he did, which was so totally amazing. And these are located in the Vatican museums today. But this picture that you're seeing here, this is the Sistine Chapel. And these tapestries on the wall here originally hung on the walls of the Sistine Chapel, but they do not today. They're in the Vatican Museum. But this picture was taken in 2020 when they were put back in the Sistine Chapel to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Raphael's death. Now, they were commissioned in 1515 by Pope Leo X for the Sistine Chapel, and they depict the lives of the apostles St. Peter and St. Paul. And what I learned in the exhibition at the Met was that the commission of these actually almost bankrupted the Vatican because well, I'll go into that in a minute. But the process of tapestry making involves an artist who designs the tapestry. He draws the compositions, and that was Raphael in this case. And then you have to have a weaver who translates the design into a woven textile. So the Raphael drawings, which are called cartoons, and it doesn't have anything to do, with a cartoon, but it comes from the Italian word cartone, which means large paper. The Raphael cartoons were then woven into tapestries by the workshop of Peter van Alst in Brussels, and the artisans there used silver and gold thread, colored wool, and silk. So Pope Leo had to pay Raphael to do the cartoons, and then he had to pay the workshop to create all the tapestries, and that's why it almost bankrupted the Vatican. So Raphael's drawings, the cartoons, right? So these are the tapestries that are on the wall. This is one of the cartoons. Now the cartoons by Raphael, which are now in the Victoria and Albert Museum, they are made with black chalk and charcoal, pen and ink, opaque watercolor, white heightening, and they're on huge sheets of paper that were joined together, as big as the tapestries. So, the weaver just copied what was on the paper. And you can see here, if you look closely, you see how the paper was glued together to make it as big as the tapestry. So this is the first one. And as I said, they're the lives of St. Peter, And who was the other one I said? St. Peter and I'll find it in a minute. Anyway, so and this first one is the miraculous draught of fishes, and this is from Luke. And this depicts, of course, one of the founding moments of Christianity when Simon, who is a poor Jewish fisherman, and he can't catch any fish, and Christ intercedes, and look at all the fish now that are in, he too much fish. He didn't even know what to do with all the fish. So now you see that Christ and Simon, who becomes Saint Peter now, they have these halos. So I'm not going to go into talk about all of them. I don't have enough time. I don't want to keep you. But you can see here, this is when Christ is giving St. Peter the keys to the kingdom. So here's Christ, here's St. Peter, and here he is with the keys. And then these are other ones. I can't go through all of them, but I just did want to give you an idea of them. There were 10 altogether, and there are 7 that survived today because, Rome was sacked. And when they were sacked, a lot of these things were destroyed. And then I just wanted to show you in this last one that I have for you. This is, who is this? This is somebody preaching at some other place, some place. Um, Whatever. But anyway, you see in the background here, you see this face here, that's the face of Pope Leo, who Raphael is saying, okay, you've commissioned me to make this. I'm gonna put you, into the cartoon. So this is Raphael's last work, and I'm going to finish with this. This is called The Transfiguration. It's in the Vatican museums today. And you can see now he has really, this a late work. He has shifted toward heightened drama, richer color, dynamic movement. The Transfiguration is this pivotal New Testament event where Jesus is revealed in his divine glory to Peter, James, and John on a mountaintop. And Jesus's face is shining like the sun, and his clothing became dazzling white as he spoke with Moses and Elijah. So we'll get closer here. So here's Moses with his tablets, and here's Elijah. Here are these disciples have fallen asleep, and when Jesus is revealed, they wake up, and they're all transfigured. Now this painting was found in his studio at his death. And it's really quite remarkable. It has 2 different Bible stories that are not really all that much related together in one image, which is really interesting. Now, the top one has this triangular form. This one down at the bottom has a more circular form here. But I'll tell you what this one is. What this bottom one is, this is it's you have here this you have all the other disciples, not the 3 that are up at the top, and they are trying to intervene to help this poor boy who has become possessed or something. And here are his parents, right? And they're all pointing at him, etc. But they can't help him because only Jesus can perform these miracles. And here you have, so you see, this is a more circular configuration. So you have in the 2 parts of this was an altarpiece. This was made to be part of an altarpiece, but you see it's so balanced by the top and the bottom, even if they're not really related in terms of stories in the Bible. Now, France would briefly possess this altarpiece because when Napoleon conquered Rome, he insisted that he take this painting as part of the Treaty of Tolentino. And he also took hundreds or maybe 100 other items from the papal collections in Rome because he felt that they would glorify him. And he stuffed them all into the Louvre. And in fact, he renamed the Louvre at that time the Napoleon Museum. Sound familiar, right? A leader trying to change the name of a cultural institution to show his own glory. But this painting, The Transfiguration, was returned to Rome as with the other works after the fall of Napoleon. And it's also like what's happening today. And it's now on display permanently in the Vatican museums. Now, Raphael died in Rome on April 6, 1520. As I said, he was only 37 years old. He died on Good Friday. And one of the eulogists at his funeral said, "Why should we be surprised that Raphael died on Good Friday? Christ was the God of nature, and Raphael was the God of art." And they think that he must have suffered from some acute illness, maybe something like pneumonia that just, caught him off guard. And after a very short, intense fever, he just died. And he was buried with great honor in the Pantheon. If you've ever been in the Pantheon in Rome, it is such an amazing building. And his tomb is inside there. It's adorned with the Madonna del Sasso, the Madonna of the Rock, which was designed by Raphael, but was executed by his pupil Lorenzo Lotti. Now, Raphael's achievement really lies in his, as I tried to get across to you, in his synthesis of influences and his ability to create works of profound harmony and clarity and emotional resonance. And so from his early training in Urbino to those monumental Vatican frescoes that I showed you, Raphael consistently redefined his art, pushing toward this ideal of beauty that remains so compelling today. And his early death left so much unrealized. We can't even imagine what he would have done if he had lived, particularly in architecture, because there's really nothing, very little exists today. Yet his impact on the Renaissance and therefore on Western art as a whole really remains totally immense. And Raphael did not merely reflect the high Renaissance, but he really defined it.
Thank you so much, Janet. That was amazing. And I'll talk to you more about Zoom later. I don't want to spend anyone time, but we'll talk about that later. But anyway, I'm curious. You were talking about how Raphael was working in such close proximity to Michelangelo. Was there
Right.
a rivalry? I remember briefly hearing about a rivalry between the two of them. And could you elaborate?
More so on Michelangelo's part. Michelangelo was very threatened by Raphael. Raphael was this young kid, who had burst on the scene. Michelangelo was very established and he had a very difficult personality anyway. But Raphael really adored Michelangelo, and he wasn't jealous of him at all. He wanted to emulate him and all of that. But Michelangelo was very worried about Raphael. Probably breathed a sigh of relief when he died.
Oh, so and Raphael was, you said, very influenced by Michelangelo, and also you pointed out that there was uh, some conjecture from art historians that the Mona Lisa inspired Raphael.
Yeah,
Were there
that
any?
portrait of
Yeah,
Castiglione.
yes. Do you see that elsewhere in Raphael's works, his
Well,
inspiration?
yeah, I think in some of his Madonnas, that's why I showed the comparison at the very beginning of the talk, because I think where, especially, the Madonna of the Rocks, the Leonardo, where they're just so lovely, and I think you can really see that in Raphael's as well. But I have to say, one of the reasons why I don't, there are two reasons why I don't really do a lot of stuff on the Renaissance. One is because even though the paintings are glorious and wonderful, I don't know a lot about Christianity. I'm Jewish, so it's like I had to do a real deep dive in this talk, and it was fascinating and wonderful to do. So they don't move me in any kind of spiritual way, paintings from the Renaissance, but of course they move me because they're glorious and gorgeous, gorgeous paintings. And also, I have such a hard time keeping all of those Italian names straight. There's
I
so
was
many,
going to
and
ask you,
every
Janet.
artist has like 3 or 4 different names. It drives me crazy. So I don't really do a lot of that. But I had to do the thing on Raphael because of the show at the Met, and I'm so glad I did because I learned so much. And then when I went to the show, I said, "Oh, I got to add all this stuff to my talk," and that's why I had to edit things out to make sure that it wouldn't go too far. I attended a talk last night or 2 nights ago by somebody else, and it wasn't about art, it was something else. And she just went on for like an hour and a half, and I said, "Oh, I'm just not going to do that to my audiences if I can help it." So I'm trying to be good, but it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Janet, I know sometimes you do two-parters and even
Yeah,
three-parters. And
yeah.
already in our chat window, we have a request for a Raphael part two from both Nina and elsewhere. Joe, I think, had requested Raphael part two. Joe also extends his thanks for this program.
Not going to happen, I'm afraid. But
But
that happened to me recently. I was doing a talk on an artist that I didn't know anything about, Joseph Arthur Schick, and there was an exhibition at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. So I went, and after I went to the exhibition, I added all these things, and I said I got to make it a two-parter. So that does happen. Yes, that does happen, but it's
yeah,
not going to happen with Raphael. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Well, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I know that Janet has inspired me to do my own research on my free time. You're just so inspirational, Janet. So
Thank you.
feel free, everyone, to continue researching Raphael and his works because, wow, just marvelous. And oftentimes you hear these names and there's just so much to learn about these great artists. So thank you, Janet, for bringing them into our homes, and enlightening
Now,
us.
are there any other questions that need, or are they mostly comments?
Yes, we have mostly comments. There was something actually about the painting with the woman with the unicorn, whether or not that had been restored. That was
Yeah,
earlier
that was
on.
interesting, wasn't it?
That was interesting.
Yeah.
The technology nowadays to see the layers of paint is fascinating. I wonder if these artists, if they were alive today, would be horrified that, their giraffes would be able to be visible to us. Oh my goodness. So,
Well, everybody, I'm reading some of the comments. They're just so nice. Thank you so much. I took a lot of time off in August, and I haven't. This is the first talk I've done in a while, so it's great to be back. And and so it's very nice that you're saying such lovely things. I appreciate it so much.
well, what a way. I'm glad we could help welcome you back after your summer. All right. Well, everyone, I think the next time we have Janet will be in December, and we will let everyone know if you want to keep in touch and learn more about our programming at Pennington Public Library. Feel free to visit penningtonlibrary.org. We feel free to also, you can send me an email. I can add you to our email list. We always try to add a variety of educational programs for everyone to tune into. So definitely check us out. And thanks again to the Arts Council and Carol with
Yes,
the Arts
yes.
Council.
Thank you to you, Kim, for being such a great host, and to the
Yay.
Arts Council for co-sponsoring this. I appreciate it. How many people did we have at the height?
I think at the height we had around 70.
Oh,
Around
that's nice. That's
70.
good. I like
Yeah, that's
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 nice.
great. Oh yeah, my email address, Joe, is kha@penningtonlibrary.org. Yeah, feel free to drop me a line. Wes wants to know if Raphael had any siblings.
And his mother died in childbirth with his sister,
Okay.
but the baby didn't survive either. That's what I recall. I hope I'm right about that. I have a memory of reading about that at the exhibition.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, everyone. Well, relax, have a late dinner if you want. Think about art still, do more research,
And
whatever it is.
yes, and
Just have a
thank you
wonderful
everybody for
evening.
coming.
Yeah, thank you, Janet. All right. Good
Good
night,
night, everybody. Good night,
everyone.
Kim. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.